Today, we are going to learn how to use Ansible, show you some examples, and introduce you to a few quick tips just to, help you get moving along faster. Hey, I'm Toby. I've been working in the IT automation industry for over 10 years. And before we get started, I just wanted to start with the simple concept of what Ansible is. So Ansible is an automation tool, and it allows you to run a task or a series of tasks across multiple servers. And that's it, really. It's a very simple language to understand. It's just written in YAML. It's very, very human readable. You can break Ansible down into a few components. So you've got ad hoc commands, you have got Ansible playbooks, and you have got Ansible roles. Without further ado, let's get on with the session. So let's have a look at Ansible ad hoc tasks. Now, in the industry, ad hoc tasks aren't used nearly as much as they could be. Most people just use playbooks and either tasks within playbooks or import roles into those tasks. But actually, an ad hoc command could be just as powerful. Why write a playbook when really you just want to do one thing very quickly? An example of that could be the bash vulnerability a couple of years ago, or the OpenSSL vulnerability as well. Both of those you needed to upgrade one package. Now, with the OpenSSL ones, there may have been some issues as to why you didn't want to just blindly go around upgrading OpenSSL everywhere. But bash, probably a little bit less of an issue. And the bash vulnerability, actually, I went around and installed thousands of updated bash on thousands of machines with an ad hoc command. Very, very simple. So in order to do that, you need to use the ad hoc command, like I said, not a playbook, and just pass it a couple of arguments. But essentially, it's still just the same way that you do things with Ansible. So moving over to the terminal. So as with anything in Ansible, whether it be an ad hoc task or a playbook, you're going to start with an inventory file. So in here, I have two inventory files. I've got the classic inventory file, where you have the group name in square brackets and then the servers in that group. And if you had multiple groups in here, you would have different square brackets starting under localhost here that might say web servers, etc., etc. Equally, I have a JSON version of an inventory file, and here it is, broken into computer readable format. Now, what's quite interesting about JSON is it's more commonly used if you're doing like dynamic inventories, which is where you can write code to dynamically generate you a file like this, or execute something while running your playbook that will create you a dynamic inventory. And it's more used when the inventory is made by a computer as opposed to you typing one out. Most people I know wouldn't just go and write out JSON like this, but you could. Ansible will take either. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. So the first example I'm going to demonstrate today, the easiest one I think for a beginner to use, is the shell module. And the reason why it's the easiest is because if you've got bash scripts that you're just write very simple commands into, the shell module is where you may start. Now, I don't recommend actually when you get good at Ansible that you use the shell module very often, because the modules that Ansible have written give you better outputs, give you better safeguards, and just ensure that things are done properly. But the shell module is there, and that's what I'm going to use for this first demonstration. So here's the documentation on the shell module. Now, the documentation in Ansible is brilliant. It's got very, very good examples at the bottom of the file. It gives all the parameters that you may need. Now, obviously, you can change to which version of Ansible you're using. And here are some of the parameters that you're using. So in our example, we're not going to go through all these parameters. This is a very quick 101. We're going to be using the command parameter. Now, the command parameter can be just used on its own. If it is used on its own, you don't even need to prefix it with a command syntax in the output that we're doing. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, we've got some examples. So as you can see here, now the examples that Ansible give are always in playbook format, but I want to show you how you can use the format here and also the format in the arguments at the top to do something in an ad hoc task. So this first one is just going to run this. Now, what's quite interesting about this, you can see there's no command prefix like here. It's just the command. And that's what I mean, where you don't need to prefix it with command. If you're doing anything else, so if you need to actually run this command from a specific directory like here, you are going to need to prefix it so that Ansible knows what is what. So what we're going to do is just run the command. I'm going to pull the uname out of a couple of servers, and I'm going to show you a couple of gotchas. So if I go ahead and type in Ansible, we're going to be using a -i for an inventory file. The inventory file that we're going to use, we could either use inventory or inventory.json. I'm just going to use the normal inventory file. We're going to use the all group in here. If that was called web servers, I would type web servers here. We're going to be using a -m, which is for the module. Now I just showed you the shell module, which is what we're going to be using, and then a -a for the arguments that we wish to pass to this module. Now in here we could type cmd equals and type out the command. We don't need to do that. We can just type the command. So if I do a uname -a, this is going to fail. And the reason this is going to fail is I haven't set up any authentication. There's no keys. I'm not giving it a password. It doesn't know how to authenticate to these servers. For the purpose of this, I'm going to do a -k, which is for password-based authentication. If you want a video on setting up SSH keys, I will link to one in this video. However, in this example, I'm just going to use password-based authentication, and then I'm going to put in the password. This is okay if every server has the same password. If they have different passwords, then you are limited to SSH keys only. Now, I've typed my password in here. Now I'm going to press enter, and one of these servers is still going to fail, and you can see that here. And the reason this server has failed is I'm not using SSH keys, and I have host key checking enabled. I've got two options here. I can either disable host key checking, or I can actually go and make sure that I can log into this server, or at least get past the prompt that has the host key checking part. So before I do that, we can see here that the output has happened. This is the uname from this server here. This is the uname from this server here. So we've got one here that's using a 3.10 kernel. We've got a 4.18 kernel. We've got another 4.18 kernel. This first one it doesn't know because it could not authenticate to it. So localhost, if I SSH that, the reason you're getting that warning is this, and we've all seen this the first time we've logged into a server. Now, if you're working with servers you use in day out, you're never going to see this. So I added localhost just to show you this problem. If I just type yes, okay, it's added it to my list of known hosts now. If I go and run this again and put in my password, what we'll notice is I do not get that error anymore. So as long as it is in your known hosts, you'll be fine. The next thing we get is some warnings. Now we can again hide warnings in an Ansible configuration file. And this is basically just saying that we're using a Python interpreter that is a bit old. They want us to use Python 3. We're using 2.9 on these two servers here. Again, you can hide the warnings, or you can see the warnings. To me, it's not really a big issue. So we can see here now this last server again is another 3.10 kernel. Okay, so we've got two 3.10 kernels and two 4.18 kernels. So that is uname-a, quite useful. And you can do whatever you want. If you wanted to see which version of bash is installed, put my password in again. Sorry, that will give all the files. If I did a -i, it will give me for every single server which version of bash is using. And you can use that to do any command on all the servers. So that's the first thing. It's quite informative. You can get some good information out of that. One step further than that is to actually do something a little bit more meaningful. So if I come over here, this here is the package manager. Now, the Ansible package manager is quite powerful in that assuming that the package that you're trying to install is the same version, same name, so HTTPD versus Apache 2, you've got a few extra things to do if you're doing something between Ubuntu and a Red Hat derived operating system. However, if they're the same, like bash, you can use the package manager instead of the apt manager and do a where OS equals, Debian derived, etc. You can just use package and it will try and work it out for you, and it does a very good job. Okay, so we're going to use the package manager today. As I explained earlier, in a previous role that I had to go and upgrade bash on a lot of servers, thousands of servers. Now, I could have written a script and wrapped that in a for loop and typed my password out thousands of times, or made sure I had SSH keys. In the real world, that's not really something that is easy to do, and I don't have my SSH keys everywhere all the time. So I did it as an ad hoc command. Okay, I used the package manager. Okay, and I just said make sure that bash is at the latest version. So if we scroll down here, we can see the parameters. Okay, now in this example, I'm actually using multiple parameters. So I'm not going to be able to just do, one thing in those quotes at the end. I need the name and I need the state. Both of these things are required, we can see here. So we can use the name, and then we've got three possible options for the state: present, absent, or latest. Now, present is obviously very good if you're trying to do something and you just need to make sure that a version is on the server. Use present, don't use latest. Latest will always make sure it's on the latest version. You may not always want that. You may want to just make sure that there is a version on there, and then move on to the next task in a playbook or something like that. So back to our terminal, we can do a Ansible. Well, in fact, we can just go up. Ansible-i inventory again, all. Instead of the shell command, we're going to use the package module. And in our arguments, we're going to do a couple of things. Now, unfortunately, I can't demonstrate the bash upgrade on these servers as they are running the latest version of bash. But there is one thing that they're not running, and that is the latest version of OpenSSL. So in order to do that, we need two things. We need their name and the state. So if I do the state of latest and the name of OpenSSL and do a -k, put in my password, that will go onto all of those servers and upgrade OpenSSL where there is an upgrade available. And here we have it. Let's go and install HTTPD. All of these servers are Red Hat derived operating systems, and therefore HTTPD would be the correct name for the web server. So let's go ahead and install the latest version of Apache onto all of these servers. And there we go, it's done, and it was that quick. Again, if we didn't want them, instead of doing latest, we can do absent. So absent will remove packages, something like telnet. If you've got telnet on all of your servers and you're trying to, become compliant to some standards, and telnet is a standard that you mustn't have running. The application mustn't be installed on servers. Set the state to absent. Put in telnet instead of HTTPD in this example. It will go away and remove telnet from all of those servers. So let's have a look at Ansible playbooks. So Ansible playbooks are essentially just a collection of tasks. And these tasks run in sequential order, and pull in certain Ansible modules and do whatever is required of them to do. If we take a quick look at the collection index in Ansible, so Ansible's documentation is absolutely fantastic. There's a whole collection index, but to be perfectly honest, I just use the search. I find the search a hell of a lot easier. But I'm using the collection index today just to show you how many things you can actually manage in Ansible. So going through this list, we've got things for AWS, we've got things for Windows, we've got things for Azure, DigitalOcean, VMware, and I've actually done a video on managing VMware virtual machines. So go and check that out to get a very, very simple overview again of Ansible playbooks. But you can also manage things like Fortinets, F5s. You've got NetApp storage here, and the list goes on. Right? You've even got Splunk in here and ServiceNow. But as I say, so that kind of gives you a very high overview, because if you go into one of these, so if you went into like Community General, you then get to see actually all the different modules in that collection. So there's a lot. So what I like to do is just use the search. So today what I've got, I'm going to just move this out of the way and I'll bring it back in a moment. We have got a playbook. Okay, and here is the playbook. Now, as with anything you do with Ansible, you've got a playbook and you've got an inventory. Here's the playbook, here's the inventory. So the inventory is just 4 servers, including the server that I'm currently running this Ansible command on. And then we've got the playbook. So we can see here on this line which module we're going to be using. So I've just got a 3-task playbook. We're using the package module twice, and then we're using the service module. And we're actually going to add something to the service module. But the one thing I love about playbooks is anyone can read this. I could give this to my 7-year-old son and he could pretty much understand what it's going to do. It's going to install Ansible, install Apache. It's going to use the package module to do that. If we want the documentation on that, here it is. I put that in just for ease of reading and, you know, showing you where all the documentation is. What package are we looking at? The HTTPD package. Okay, that's Apache on a Red Hat server. And then the state, we want the state to be present. We want that package to be there. Again, here we want to remove telnet. This is freeform. You can call this whatever you want. We're using the package module again. The name of the package is telnet, and we want to make sure that this state is absent. Okay, and then lastly, we're using the service module this time. We want the name to be HTTPD and the state to be started. And there is one last thing that I'm going to add to this service module, is to ensure that it is always started on boot. So having a look here, I'm just going to pull this, although you could just use the search and search for the package module. But if I bring this over here, this is the package module. So what's great about this, it tells you the parameters. So you've got name, string, and use. I don't use the use too much. The great thing about the package module is it can understand the difference in the different package managers. So you don't need to say, right, I need the yum module if I'm using Red Hat, or I'm going to use the apt module if I'm using Ubuntu. You don't need to worry about that. Just use the package module and it will do both. If you need to specify it because the package module hasn't worked out which package manager you're using, you can actually tell it to use one or the other. But it kind of defeats the purpose of using the package manager. If you have to tell it, you might as well use the yum manager or the apt manager. And then we've got some examples here. So examples of exactly how to do what you need to do with this module. You can just lift this. You can copy and paste that. If you have a look at that and this, it's the same, right? I mean, this one's install ntpdate. They put it all in, you know, ansible.builtin.package. Don't need to, you can just use package. Name state. Now, the one thing about YAML is you need to make sure all your spaces, all your colons, all your dashes are all in the right place. That comes after using it a little bit. But there are online, you know, YAML validators and things like that. If you're not sure, you can copy and paste your playbook into a validator and just make sure that, you know, it is valid YAML. So we're using the package module. We're using the name HTTPD and the state of present. So we're using the package module, the name of, we're using HTTPD, and the state is present. So one thing you might ask is, well, what different states are there? Let's go and look at the documentation. Here's state. We've got present, absent, latest. So one thing you might want to know, you might be asking yourself, is the difference between present and latest? Well, surely if it's present, if you're saying for a playbook to make sure that it's present, it's going to install the latest one. In that scenario, yes. If it's not there, it's going to go, you know, use your normal repository, pull the latest version in. However, if it's already there and you just say present, it won't do anything. If you want to upgrade your system, pick latest. You know, if you're writing a playbook that goes around and updates bash or OpenSSL everywhere, you write the package name to be bash and the state to be latest. And then when it runs, even if bash is there, it will make sure that it's running the latest version available, as opposed to present, where it will just make sure that bash is there. And if it's not there, it will install the latest, but if it's already there, it will do nothing. So that's the big difference. So we're using the package module twice. Got it here, and then we have the service module. So services, and we can see it here. Now the good thing about the service module, again, as with all Ansible documentation, really, really well documented. Here are all the parameters we need, and here are some examples. So in fact, this is pretty much the one that we've done. We can see here, we've got name, the service, the name of HTTPD, and the state of started. Let's have a look at this example. Service, the name, HTTPD, and the state of started. So we can start it, we can stop it, we can restart it, or we can reload it. Now, the one thing I haven't got in here is if I was to reboot this machine, Apache would not be running. Okay, now if we look through this list, can we see an example that will help us? This one here, enabled. Okay, so let's scroll up, have a quick look at what enabled means. Enabled here, enabled. Whether the service should start on boot. Well, that's exactly what we want, and we want it to be enabled. So all we need is enabled, yes or no. The default will be nothing. It won't actually set. So we want to just go enabled, yes. Make sure it survives a reboot. And that's it. So that's this playbook. What we're now going to do is actually run this playbook. So if I type Ansible playbook, now I don't need to give it a -i. I'm going to in this example, and then I'm going to show you why I don't. Okay, we're using the inventory file, and then we're using play.yaml. Okay, now if I run that, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because I haven't given it my password, and there are no keys set up. So I'm going to do a -k, which will prompt me now for my password. If you're not running this as root, you will want a capital K to make it ask for your sudo password. And then at the top here, under tasks, you need to type become and then root to make sure that you elevate to the correct privileges. And I'll post a link again in the description of how to do that. So we can see here it's gone through. So it's gone through, it's gathered facts, it's installed Apache, it's removed Telnet, and then it started Apache. And that's it, it's done. So just to prove that, I've just taken one of those IPs at random. And here it is. And that is a very simple playbook. Now, obviously, to build a web server, that's not all you need. You might need the files module to copy some files into a location. You might need the Git module to pull down your source code. There are thousands and thousands of modules to make a playbook do exactly what you want. So I mentioned when I ran that playbook that I did a -i inventory. Okay, and there's actually one thing that I'm hiding in the playbook to remove some warnings from the screen that I just wanted to show you. So Ansible.cfg, there are many locations that this can live. If you want a server-wide configuration, it can sit in etc Ansible, Ansible.cfg. I like to keep them within the projects because then I can check out a project. I don't need to mess around too much then with the local Ansible setup. And I've got two things in here. I've got defaults, just making it sure that these are defaults that I want to change. And then we've got inventory. So I'm using inventory. I could set that to inventory.yaml. My file is just called inventory. There's no suffix after it. If I wanted a different inventory file, I could just do that. And then I've got this interpreter Python auto silent. Now, the reason I've got this is there's a couple of servers on here that if I was to comment this out, and I will demonstrate this for you, and run the playbook, I get some warnings about the Python interpreter on these servers. You see here. So, there's some warnings there that I don't really want to show during my demonstrations. I also understand what these warnings are, and they're not a problem for me. Okay, so I have chosen to auto silent them. Okay, and then the other thing is this inventory. Inventory equals inventory. So I don't need this -i inventory anymore. I can take that out because I've got it in this configuration file. And then in the playbook, I'm saying all. So in the configuration file, it says inventory, inventory. And then in the playbook, it says all. So we go to inventory, all. Right, it's doing these 4 servers. So if I take that out and run it, again, it started. There are many, many more things that you can do in an Ansible configuration file. You can do things like how many forks you want to run. You can really, really tune Ansible. If you've got quite a beefy machine, you can, run on many, many servers on one host just by adjusting the forks and things like that. I'll put a link in the description as well as to the documentation for Ansible.cfg that you guys can have a look and play around with those settings. I hope that this has been helpful. If there's anything further you'd like to see, please leave a comment. I'll try my best to do a video on that for you. If you've got any questions, again, leave a comment. If this video has been helpful, please like it. Subscribe if you find what I'm talking about useful and you want future notifications, hit that bell. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.